I'm Joshua Bardwell, here for Armattan Quads, and today I'm going to show you how to put together your rooster frame. Let's do it. We'll start with the bottom plate of the rooster. Just get all of these out. Plastic. This is the bottom plate of the rooster here, and here is the top plate, which came with this. We'll set this padding aside for now, and we've also got this, which is going to be the camera plate. We'll set those aside, and we'll start with just the bottom plate. And we're also going to need 2 legs, and we're also going to need this piece, which I overlooked when I was throwing out the plastic. This piece. Okay, great. These are the pieces we're going to need for step 1. The next thing you need to do is install these captive nuts on this dog bone piece that goes on top of the leg. A common way of doing that is to simply loosely install the captive nut on the screw and then tighten down the screw, letting the screw pull the captive nut into the carbon. That'll work if you're careful, if you make sure that the captive nut goes in straight. But if anything goes wrong, you can tear up the carbon. Things can go a little bit off. And sometimes, especially if they don't go in straight, it'll be so tight that you just can't finish pulling it in. The tool that I recommend for this job is, if you have one, this is a plastic-headed and brass-headed mallet. The plastic head here is perfect for knocking these in. It's not going to deform them. If you try and do this with like a steel-headed hammer or claw hammer or something, you may mess them up. But this is really the best tool. The brass or plastic head is perfect for installing these press nuts. Now the 12mm bolts are going to come up from the bottom side. The arm is going to go on top of them, and this guy is going to tighten down just like so. And for the time being, I'm just going to leave this loose. We'll tighten it up later, but I'm just going to leave it a little loose for now. Okay, there you go. If you've been looking at this piece of carbon and wondering when I was going to mention it, now is the time. This is a piece that was added to the rooster in about the middle of 2018, and the purpose is that on the standard rooster build, the arms, even when they're tightened down, have just a tiny little bit of give, maybe 1mm of give, and some people feel that they don't want that. So this piece, what you're going to do is you're going to just set it down in between the arms like so. Now be careful because it isn't actually, I don't think it's actually 100% square. Can you see that one way I put it in, it's really floppy and loose? Don't do that. But you're going to put it in the way that makes it the most snug. And then when you put this guy on and tighten it down, the arms don't move even a millimeter. They're just rock solid. And there's one of these for the rear, and there's one of these that goes up in the front, which I'm not going to take this whole quad apart and show it to you, but trust me, there's one for the back and one for the front. Now these are 16mm bolts, and they're going to come up through these 4 holes, and this is where, if you were doing a real build, this is where you would install the flight controller. We're just going to put these in as placeholders for now, and we'll move on. In the real build, you've got these nylon M3 standoffs that are going to go onto the screws, and the way it's going to work is the screw will go up through, the standoff will go on, and that's going to give enough spacing for your PDB or your flight controller to not touch the carbon. So then it would go on down there, and then this, or if you're doing a 2-high stack, another standoff that you would provide would go on top of that. Next, we're going to do the front of the quad, and we're going to need to take this piece and install 2 more captive nuts, the same as before. This piece screws onto the back set of bolts. So this carbon piece is screwing onto the back 2 sets of bolts. The front sets of bolts will interface directly with the titanium in a second. So let's just get that installed here. So there we go. We've got the 2 back bolts installed, and then the titanium metal piece is going to go on like this, and it's going to fit around the whole assembly and slide on snugly until the screw hole shows itself. It really fits together quite precisely, like a puzzle, so just sort of wiggle and jiggle it all together until it fits. And then M3 by 12 screw is going to go in from the bottom. And we'll do the other side the exact same way. You can see that if it doesn't line up exactly right, it's going to be a little tricky to get it to come together. So if you're having trouble, just kind of wiggle the arm until it slides in. There we go. And that titanium piece also is what kind of locks the arm into place. Now I'll go ahead and snug these down a little further. Here's where we're at now. The arms are installed and the front end is installed. The rear of the quad involves these two pieces, which install like this. I'm just going to set on the rear like so. And a screw is going to go in from the bottom to hold them in place. And that screw is going to be an M3 by 8. Now in this little bag of goodies, we've got a piece here. This carbon piece is going to install right on the back here. And make sure you install that with this larger hole on the top and these two smaller holes on the bottom. And these are going to be M3 by 6. This hole right here is intended for your SMA connector, and you're going to install this grommet that comes with the kit in that hole. And then when you're building your frame, the SMA bulkhead, if you have an SMA bulkhead connector for your video transmitter, it can screw right in there and be snug. But the grommet gives it just enough give that it can move a little bit in a crash and not get snapped off. It's a pretty nice little design. Be careful if you choose to use a tool of any kind to install this. If you choose to do that, like a screwdriver or a needle nose pliers or something, it is easy to tear the grommet, and there does not appear to be a spare, so be careful there. These little guys are for the antenna tubes, and they go in these holes here, and again, you just got to kind of work them in until they go. I may need to use a tool here, but I'll have to be real careful not to tear anything. It may have been easier to do this before I installed the plate onto the quad. Yeah. Oh, here's a little tip from me to you. Learn from my mistakes, people. What finally worked was kind of just putting this in here and just kind of working it through with these little... Let me see if I can show you guys how I did it. There we go. Got it. Whew. Got it. Well, that's a real hassle. I'll bet there's an easier way to do that, but I don't know what it might be. Now the kit also comes with two of these little white plastic washers, and the idea there is that one's going to go on one side of your SMA, then the SMA is going to go through. The other one will go on the other side, and then the SMA nut and the lock ring, if you so prefer, will go on and tighten it down. Frankly, you probably could just ignore those and just install your antenna and use that. It'll probably tighten down plenty tight. And it'll compress that and hold it in place. Make sure you get it fully tightened so that the antenna doesn't rotate. But that's how that's going to install in the end. Did I install it upside down? When you install the rear pieces, be aware that you can install them upside down. You see what I've done here? One side is for the top plate and one is for the bottom. So you see how it's kind of hanging off the edge here, right here? Yeah. So install them the correct side up. Now at this point in the build, you probably actually complete the build, do all the electronics. In fact, I almost find it easier on some of these builds to do the soldering with the front end removed. That's your call, but you're certainly going to now finish up the whole quadcopter build, installing your flight controller and ESCs, and then the top can go on. The top it doesn't have a direction. Either side can go up. And you can also install this battery pad. It might be easier to do it before you install it on the quad or after. It's your call. Just get it lined up. And don't squeeze it down until you're sure it's lined up as best you can. And then when you're sure it's how you want it, go ahead and just press it down. And then this is going to go on with more 6mm M3 screws. And on the back, is that also an M3x6? Yeah, it is. Interesting. They do 8mm up from the bottom, but 6mm from the top. I guess it's because the bottom takes more force in an impact or something. We're now going to install the camera plate. That's going to be the same idea as before. And then these are going to be installed with M3x4mm screws. Lastly, if you wish, you can install these dog bones here. If you do choose to install them, it is nice because, like, if you set the quadcopter down on your car or something, it keeps the screws from all scratching up your paint job. If you do install them, they tear off pretty easily. These are high quality, but after so many rough landings, they will tear off. What I like to do, this is just a little tip from me to you, this is not an Armattan thing, but what I like to do is install them just a little bit inwards and then put a wrap of electrical tape around them. Just a couple wraps, and that helps protect them from abrasion and tearing and makes them last a lot longer. So that's up to you. Some people put them further out, but then it's a little hard to get the electrical tape around because the motor's in the way. I like to move them in just a little, install them just like that, put some electrical tape around them. And there it is. Your Armattan Rooster is complete. Ain't she a beauty? I mean, come on. I'm Joshua Bardwell, here for Armattan Quads. Happy flying.